All right, everyone, welcome back to the LOOPcast. Today, I'm joined by my co-host Josh, Erica, and we just had our show notes document showed. Nighthawk, come on, man!
Behind the curtain. Now you
No one
know.
can see behind the curtain here. Yes, I have to come face the music. Yes, I did share a picture of myself smiling at halftime of the game last night. Yes, the Lions did blow a 17-point lead, and
Ouch town.
I'm crushed.
Yeah, that was rough.
You're wearing black.
Don't be
Somber mode.
sad that don't be sad that you were there or something. Be glad that it happened. I don't know. I need all the positive affirmations I can get today, but
Some other kind of crap that they give to whiners to believe in.
yeah, I
Welcome to defeat, my friend.
I sent out a Bible quote this morning. Basically, people have been texting me as if I was on the team, which is great. I'm glad that people associate me with that. But I sent out a Bible quote, Romans 5:3-4. Not only that, but we rejoice in sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does
Well,
not
there
put
you
us to
go.
shame. And
That's
we will be
Pogo
back.
going all
Pogo.
messianic on us there.
Pogo's like the assistant to the assistant to the assistant head coach for the Detroit Lions, mourning his team,
Yeah,
Pep
wearing
talk.
black. And I just thought I'd wear the color of his opponent, the red.
Real classy, real
Painful.
classy.
It's painful.
So while football is fun, we have some other competitions going on, and I wish these competitions weren't going on, but they are. So right now, our first topic here, we got to talk Texas. Texas is having its Alamo moment over its own state sovereignty in its own country, America. Right now, their Governor Abbott, he has a quote basically talking about the authority granted to Texas as a state to defend its own state sovereignty, and basically it's being infringed right now from the executive branch. Erica, would you like to go in a little bit of the specifics here of the argument that Texas has that no, indeed, you can't come take this barbed wire from us. You're violating our rights.
Yeah, I would love to go into this. So January 24th, this is just the end of last week. We just missed it for our Thursday recording. Governor Greg Abbott issued this statement from the state of Texas, and it opens thusly. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. And he says the executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. And he goes on to just indict President Biden on every count of his duty as the president of the United States. But that opening line there, I was getting major Declaration of Independence vibes. I have to say, my first reaction was sort of a gut punch, little wrench in the gut there. This is sobering language because it's Abbott. It's the governor of the state who has since been joined by 25 other Republican governors. No thanks to you, Vermont, fake Republican governor. Anyway, so now we're talking more than half of the governors in the United States pitting themselves or acknowledging that they have already been pit against the federal government when it comes to the protection of the borders. And again, very sobering language, talking about the president violating his oath, instructing his agencies to ignore federal statutes. And I think the argument, the core of the argument here, when it comes down to, okay, who's responsible? People are saying, oh, Congress needs to get it together and pass stronger laws, or Congress needs to, spend more money on the border, and it's all the Republicans' fault. He's saying, no, the president has all of the powers that he needs in order to execute faithfully and to protect our borders, and he's simply not doing it. And yeah, so that was the governor's message. He's like, we're going to continue because you have abdicated your responsibility. We will now step in and defend our state. And like I said, more than half the governors in the US are like, you go for it. Go Texas.
Yeah, and first off, shout out to Adamo. Texas has already had its Alamo moment. You know, the Alamo. Dang it. Live podcasting is tough.
It was an allegory.
I thought it was a good
Hopefully
reference,
it's not the end. It doesn't end like the Alamo ended, but
And have a second moment, I guess,
Yeah. I'll go with Declaration of Independence.
It's just kind of amazing, though, because normally with this kind of situation, we had the Supreme Court had the opportunity to go on and side with Texas in that emergency stay. And the Supreme Court, unfortunately, Amy Coney Barrett did not vote the right way. And so the Supreme Court decided not to intervene at that exact moment and allowed the federal government to try to get rid of this razor wire border. But normally, Normally, what would then happen is Republican politicians would just kind of fold over, roll over, just say, well, I'm upset. I'm going to send out a bad press release, and this is just terrible. And I was stunned. I was surprised to see Greg Abbott say, actually, you know what? No, we're still going to secure our border because we as Texans have a constitutional duty to protect our own citizens. And the federal government has dropped the ball. They haven't done their duty, but we're going to still do ours, and we will still protect our border. I was absolutely amazed that Greg Abbott just didn't roll over. He did the right thing, and it was awesome to see those other 25 governors show solidarity with Texas and say, you know what, this is a national problem because the president of the United States has abdicated his responsibility. In fact, it's treason. Joe Biden has committed treason. He has not done his duty. He has intentionally let this border become a wide open problem, human rights violation, a crisis. And the thing is, when he first came in office 3 years ago, Joe Biden immediately ended the border emergency. He said, there's no emergency.
Title 42, he repealed that. Or I think he let it die out. I think he would have needed to re-up it.
He let it expire, but I went through
He
a few
declared it was no longer an emergency, though.
Right. He said it's no longer an emergency. And this is 3 years ago. This week, we were just calculating, and we have 1 year to fix it, guys. So come on. If 3 years ago this week, Biden, he suspended the Remain in Mexico program. Which require, so again, I'm going to go through these, but only for the sake of showing that, in fact, Biden has everything he needs to fix this problem tomorrow, right? So we had the Remain in Mexico program, which required the asylum seek applicants to wait their hearings on the other side of the U.S. frontier, which is kind of a no-brainer. He repealed the rule requiring asylum seekers to apply in the countries they pass through before reaching the border. Instead, what we have now are Border Patrol agents who can't patrol the border because they are caught up in these centers processing asylum claims, and they basically just have to release everyone into the interior and say, okay, show up in 2 years. No one will. He has abused the narrow emergency parole power to release and give work permits to over 1 million illegal aliens. I mean, it just goes on and on. These were all things that we were doing under Trump to try and stem the tide, and he just refuses to do them. He just abrogated them, and it's absolutely his responsibility.
Yeah, and two things. Nighthawk, can you pull up a map of the governors that have backed Texas? It's a really interesting, almost like 50-50 split at this point, but the map does look pretty interesting when you look at it. So that's number one. Number two is this conversation is so frustrating. And I think how it's been perceived by the average person as well is kind of politics as usual, because the way that it's been presented now is, well, Biden is ready to come to the table for a border deal. I've seen stuff from, I think Yahoo had an article saying, like, he says that this bill will give him the tools that he needs basically to solve problems, which, as Erica has brought up, I mean, a complete lie, right? And I saw some people.
He has all the tools he needs.
So the problem to me was people were taking the bait and they're saying, wow, you know, when presented with a solution by Democrats, an opportunity to work together, Republicans are the ones that are just extending this for political gain, possibly for the 2024 election or new seats or things like that. For anyone that's actually looked at the bill that's been presented, I mean, that's a complete lie. It's just a complete lie. And funny enough, this was another interesting that came up over the weekend. Governor Ron DeSantis, put out a video, and it was a quick video, very short, sweet, to the point, basically saying Biden has always had the power to do this. He's always had the power through emergency executive order to shut down the border. He just doesn't have the will to do it. And number two, not only would he shut it down, but with this new bill, it would allow 5,000 illegal immigrants to become citizens every day. So 5,000 new Americans every day. I mean,
do the math.
Quick estimate, that's 1.82 million people every year. That is just not a tenable
solution.
That's in
addition to our already very generous immigration law that was passed with Ted Kennedy's support in 1965 that gives 1 million immigrants a year. So that's like double that.
Right.
And it's insane.
It's not a real
and
solution.
These are people. Yeah. It's very frustrating because, you know, again, it's just one of those cases where, you know, the Senate Democrats are concocting this, you know, deal on immigration, as you mentioned. And James Lankford is a Republican senator from Oklahoma. Oklahoma is super conservative state, and they have this guy, James Lankford, who's very, very left wing on immigration. He wants total amnesty. And so he's cooking up this horrible plan with Chuck Schumer, and he loves it. And it's like he's all on board with this. And the Oklahoma GOP is like, what in the world is going on? How do we have a senator from our state who's this far left on immigration? So the Oklahoma GOP passed a resolution just within the last few days condemning James Lankford for this bill. And now Lankford's trying to backpedal and saying, well, border security is national security. But he needs to be kicked out of office. We need to find a good conservative out of Oklahoma to defeat James Lankford in the primary. He is horrible. And you have other Republicans like Republican minority leader Mitch McConnell, who doesn't even really care about the immigration issue. I mean, he's pro-amnesty for the most part, but he just wants this deal passed so that he can get his funding for Ukraine. That's what he cares about. For some reason, he cares more about that than he does about the citizens of his own country. So
yeah,
you have this thing where Republicans, not all of them, just a handful of Senate Republicans, though, are acting completely at odds with all of their voters. It's bizarre. Thankfully, House Speaker Mike Johnson and the Republicans in the House are standing firm and saying, no deal. We're not doing this. This is terrible. And then Donald Trump on the campaign trail, he was saying this on Saturday, he's going to do everything he can to nix this deal and oppose it in every way. And he came out strongly against it. He came out strongly in favor of what Texas is doing. And so that was very good to see. And I agree with him. This is a horrible deal. We got to stop it.
Yeah, and I just to give a little more numbers perspective there for those who haven't heard us talk about it in the past, but that 5,000 a day number, it seems like now, I mean, right now we're looking at 10 to 12,000 a day. So you hear the 5,000 and you're like, oh, they're compromising, like they're going to back up. I mean, 5,000 is way better than 12,000. But remember, under the Obama administration, 1,000 a day felt like too much. It was considered that was a really
crisis,
bad
right.
day that was a crisis at the border. So we're still 5 times that with this. This is not a deal,
and that's the compromise.
Right. And I think, Josh, you made this point that Congress can give more money to the president, Congress can pass another regulation, but if the will isn't there, this is the executive branch's responsibility, to Greg Abbott's point. And it's unconscionable that they continue that just this week was the first time Biden even mentioned the word crisis in connection with the border. So it's just unbelievable. Oh yeah. Good article here, Mark Krikorian over at Compact, Biden's border chutzpah. I just like anything that uses the word chutzpah in the title. Obviously pro-Israel. Just kidding. That was a joke. But this is a really good analysis of precisely what executive powers already exist and how Biden's administration has just overrun them and said, oh, it's not our fault. This is Congress's job. It's not Congress's job. No, read the Constitution.
Just shoot down pretty immediately if anyone's saying this is politics as usual and it's whatever. It's no, Biden has the power to do this. He doesn't want to do it. You cite this article, but
it's not like Biden's like, gosh, I don't know what I could do to try to fix this problem. He doesn't consider it a problem.
Right.
I mean, want an open border. They want an influx of lots of illegal immigrants because they think it helps their electoral process.
Well, it does if there's amnesty.
Obviously. So, I mean, again, this is one of those things where you can't expect them like, gosh, they're really sleeping on the job. They know what they're doing and they love this. Like, stop pretending this is an accident.
So there's two things kind of going on simultaneously. One, a lot of people are pointing to the border as a major problem for the Biden reelection campaign, which I think is pretty obvious to domestic voters. But the international story is kind of interesting as well. And so the next thing we have here, unfortunately, we had 3 American troops die. They were killed by a drone strike that an air defense system failed to pick up. This is over at the Jordan Tower 22. And so first off, pray for the repose of the soul of these 3 men. I mean, 25 injured, 3 American troops killed. It's just so hard to see these numbers. These are someone's sons and daughters, American sons and daughters. So I think immediately what frustrates me is why there seems to be a lack of clear purpose of why we're there. I know we've had a lot of problem with Afghanistan. I think the point of this Jordan Tower 22 is to be anti-terrorism. But if we're in the region and don't really have the will to do, I think what a lot of people are calling for right now is basically bombing Iran, which I think is a bad idea. It just seems like we're allowing people to take pot shots at our boys, and it really frustrates me because this isn't, again, these aren't elites kids, these aren't rich people's kids. Like these are just normal everyday American soldiers that are being targeted right now. So a lot of questions up in the air. How did this happen? Why did the air defense system fail? Why are we there? Lindsey Graham took the opportunity to basically quickly say we need to bomb Iran immediately, which he's been saying now for the last couple months. Any initial thoughts on seeing the story, guys?
I mean, Lindsey Graham was like, "Oh, I'm having frosted flakes. That's why we need to bomb Iran." Like the guy. That's the answer to every question he has. He's like, Iran delenda est. I mean, he's like Cicero going crazy after every speech. But this attack happened in the far northeastern part of
classical
Jordan.
reference.
Hey, classical education. It happened where. It's not like it happened close to like the River Jordan, even though it happened in Jordan. It happened way up in the upper northeast.
Yeah, Nighthawk, can we get the map up for that? Was really helpful when I was looking at the story.
If you look at the map, you see that it's like super close to Iraq, and it's right, in the very close to Syria as well. And so this again, and the Biden administration, see, there we go. The Biden administration has been interested and involved in trying to get us entangled in Syria's sort of civil war. So this drone strike happened from the Islamic resistance in Iraq, but apparently Iran fuels them or funds them. I don't doubt that. But again, it's just one of those things where it's like, what does this have to do with our national security stake? I mean, it would be one thing if you're saying Israel's a friend, we're protecting them, but what is this? This is, look how far away from Israel that is.
Can you zoom in, Nighthawk?
It doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't understand the strategic, interest in having this base, where our American men and women are serving in that. That just seems a little out there, way out there, an outpost.
I did a little digging into, so this outpost is there it's sort of a stopping off supply station for a larger outpost that is actually inside Syria. And like you said, Josh, just the level of entanglement in proxy wars. What really kind of gets me going, I looked this up. We have more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel across the region. If you consider the Middle East running from like northern Syria down through Iraq, and all the way down to Yemen and in the Gulf of Qatar. So it's 40,000 U.S. military personnel committed in a region, and there has been no declaration of war. This is this upside down governance that we have. Congress is supposed to declare war, and this is the executive branch just continuing. I guess my biggest issue, other than our Constitution is upside down, my biggest issue is now that we are in this situation, which is really a de facto proxy war with Iran. Now that we're in the situation, what do we do? I mean, it seems like our options are pull everyone out, right? And just, abandon ship, which we know what will happen. We just saw it in Afghanistan. It was a disaster. We can escalate the war, which is what Lindsey Graham would like to do, and actually engage Iran directly. Or we continue this sort of proxy war thing where, the drone strikes. So we find the little outpost of like 40 guys from the Islamic Iraqi coalition who claim responsibility. We kill them, but we know it wasn't really them, but we don't address the problem. The whole thing is just such a mess. I don't really know practically. I don't have a good answer. And that's the most frustrating thing here. This has been decades in the making, this sort of morass that we're in the Middle East.
But part of the problem is, we have this representative republic, and we, the people, are responsible. It's not like we have a king who just goes out there and starts wars or whatever. Presumably, we have this constitutional republic. And in order to engage in war, we're supposed to have our representatives,
there's a process.
Right. And those senators would then have to turn to the American people and say, I'm intending on getting us entangled in this war. And we might be like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like such a good idea. And we have this actual public debate where citizens get to step up and say,
this is all theoretical. We don't.
I'm not so sure. I want to
that's
do
what
this.
He's saying. Yeah.
But we don't. So we just have a president who says, yeah, we're going to get involved in Syria now. And you're like, who's Syria? What is Aleppo? I don't understand. Why are we doing this? Like, that doesn't make sense. Give me a reason.
Yeah.
But we don't get that. So
actually,
short circuiting our country's public.
Vivek Ramaswamy had a really good point in this, and he's still been kind of doing the media tour even after dropping out and endorsing Trump. But he went on some secular outlets, and he's really fearless. He goes everywhere, but he was talking about the deep state, and people, as soon as they hear that, their brain turns off, right? Because they're thinking QAnon, they're thinking da 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 da, and he's like, no, it's not like that, and it's easy to explain when you get into it. And he went on to basically say, essentially, and this happens in business as well, but in government, we have a shadow government ran by bureaucrats that are unelected and stay there well beyond presidential terms, and their politicians are literally just the pawns. Like, they are the people that they send out to go be the public face of the operation. When you were talking about that, Josh, nothing made me think more like this than these war decisions being made by people, anyone but the people, or even the politicians, really. Like, the fact that we're this entrenched in the Middle East and making strategic decisions like this, no one's voting on this. No one's saying that we should be here. And so that's why people, when they say, hey, I'm running to basically slash these bureaucracies, you see it in Argentina right now. Obviously, Argentina takes up a different place in society than the United States does on a world level. But that, again, gets to the problem with war decisions, with economy decisions. Even small decisions, like if they're not being made by people that you elect, there's no more relationship and accountability. You just have people that are there for 20, 30 years making decisions that aren't on your best interests as people. So that's really frustrating to me. It was really good to hear an explanation of it broken down, and the people he actually was explaining it to, like, yeah, that actually makes sense. Like, and that actually does seem like a problem, but I never really got past the initial word deep state. And I have always felt like there's more to that. There's been a very well done smear campaign against the word, but really we all should be against people that are basically taking away our right to representation through the government. So that's how I feel.
Because they make decisions that they're not accountable for.
Exactly.
It's just, they just decide on
and they
their
get
own.
to throw around American lives like they're candy. Like, that means nothing to them. These aren't the people that are on the front lines.
It's frustrating when we have bureaucrats decide, oh, you need more fuel efficient cars, or you need to have low flush toilets, and light bulbs need to be this more energy efficient. We never voted on any of that. And that's frustrating. But this is that much more dangerous, because we're talking about our own men and women dying wearing the uniform somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Like, why? This is why we need to have go back to the Constitution. So when we're talking about whether or not we want to go to war, we decide as a nation that we're going to go to war, we vote on it, we discuss it, we debate it, and we vote on it, and then we're in. Instead of just a president deciding unilaterally to do this. Didn't we learn this from Iraq, that this was a bad idea? But even Iraq, we voted on it. I mean, it was a vote for authorization of force.
Oh my gosh!
But so often we're doing like with this stuff with Syria, and there's no vote on it. There's no debate. It just happens.
No,
it's horrible.
We should be out of there. Personal opinion. Yeah. There's no reason we should be there. It's
going isolationist. That's
because
I hate that. Okay, that's a pet peeve of mine. I hate it when people say isolationist. I know you're saying it jokingly, but it's like, you don't want to bomb other countries? You must be an isolationist.
Exactly.
I want to trade with other countries.
Point taken.
What frustrates me about this situation, similar to what frustrates me about Ukraine, which was kind of hilarious to see people draw ideological lines on that, like it's somehow because we're talking about real men and women's lives. Like, war is a humongous problem on a personal level for human beings.
War is hell.
Like, this isn't like they're just a video game character across the seas. So when we talk about Ukraine, the United States and other countries got involved without the will to finish it. And when they don't have the will to actually finish it or to back up what they say, what ends up happening is we're exhausting Ukrainian lives. This isn't risk. Like, these are real human beings that we're allowing to be cannonball fodder for Russia over something we're not willing to go over war for. That's completely irresponsible and indefensible from a Catholic social teaching perspective. It's ridiculous that we're allowing this, and we have people in the US cheering this on like it's somehow like a football game or something. Like, we're talking about real people dying over there. So the Ukraine thing really frustrates me. And it's the same thing with
Ukraine too. Tom, you ever notice this? It's honestly liberals from the suburbs who are most like pro-war on Ukraine. I mean, it's like, it's the most bizarre thing. Why are they so pro-war? It's like very weird to me. Like, I understand how conservatives can be like, well, after 9/11, maybe, Colin Powell and George W. Bush say somehow Iraq is really involved and that was a blunder. And a lot of conservatives have then taken the lesson from that, like, maybe we should be not involved in so many of these foreign wars. That's the lesson. That Donald Trump was very big on that. And what's happened now is that we got liberals are like, pounding the drum beats for war.
Well, they used to be the
Why?
people protesting like the Vietnam War. They were the hippies and
exactly.
Universities.
And why are they beating the war drums? It's like, well, who's Ukraine going against? Is it just some little piddly country? Oh, Russia, which has nukes. Great idea, guys. Like, why don't?
Well, I think the thread that ties all of these together, we've got Ukraine, Middle East, back to immigration, the war hawk. I think that it ties back to the disconnect between the ruling elite and the rest of the world. Like when you say, Tom, these are real lives, these are real people's lives that are being played with. Same with immigration, right? These are real kids in inner city schools who are being booted to online classes because they're being flooded with immigrants. And I wanted to bring this up. This poll came out at the end of last week from Rasmussen that is really an insight into this. But this poll shows us that America's richest 1% and elites. So we're talking, I think the way that they did elites were people with postgraduate degrees, with an income above a certain amount. I mean, so like and they live in suburban or urban settings, to Josh's point about white liberals, but that they overwhelmingly say that they're in favor of food rationing. They're in favor of rationing meat. They're in favor of forcing cars on people. They're in favor of funding the Ukrainian war. And then it gets down to this. This is even
electric
more
cars.
Electric cars. Sorry about that. So this gets even more interesting. Well-heeled Ivy League graduates believe that, in general, there's too much personal freedom. When you talk about, Ivy League graduates, 55% of people who graduated from Ivy League school, 55% say there is definitely too much personal freedom in the U.S., and another 30% think that we might have it about right, but they're not sure about personal freedoms. And again, it's these people who they are insulated from the effects of government policies that force these things on people. They're insulated from it because they can afford to ride out a COVID pandemic and all of those regulations and still be making money. They can afford to get their kids a private education if the public school is full of illegal migrants in the gym. And they're totally insulated
They don't
from
need the GI Bill.
the effects of how they vote.
Affect them. It doesn't affect them if Walgreens puts locks on everything in the store because they don't shop in those.
They don't shop at Walgreens.
If
I
could
and they don't care about crime until their car gets smashed in. They're so selfish.
Yeah, no, I get all this. But so Adamo, shout out Adamo, he's been in the chat for a while.
Oh,
but
hey, Adamo.
He makes the point here. This happens because we've been weak in the face of clear male actors. The problem with this isn't that we were there, but that we were attacked. If we don't respond with force, it will happen again. And I've been thinking about this because a lot of people like to juxtapose President Trump's time in office with President Biden's time in office. And I even like to go a little further back to President Obama because I remember that as well. But I remember distinctly the Syrian red line talk. Do you remember this, Mercer? Like there's a red line that will not be crossed. And then Obama just completely allowed them to cross over, dance on the line,
right. They danced on it.
Line. It did nothing. I mean, there was no response at all. So to Adamo's point, you can't I think even being there is a sign that you need to have basically the willpower to finish out threats. And America has lacked that willpower for such a long time. And even maybe the moral clarity to make actions like that, which I totally understand, which is why I'm saying we definitely should not be there. Like and this is the Trump thing too. I think the biggest difference with Trump was he brought the Saudis to the table. And whether you agree with Saudi's treatments of human rights, which of course are objectionable, we had a time of peace in the Middle East that we haven't seen neither in the Obama administration, but also definitely not during the Biden administration.
So these Muslim countries recognizing Israel. It was crazy.
Yeah,
it's just unbelievable. Yeah.
My main point is we should definitely be hesitant with American lives, and we should not make threats that we're not willing to carry out on. And I don't think we should be making serious threats to begin with. Of course, operate from a position of strength, but it just frustrates me that we're so callous about the world.
To echo what he was saying, though, is maybe what you do is you don't immediately leave. Maybe you decide quietly, like maybe we shouldn't be overextended like this, and you make a decision in a few months to maybe move your troops out of that kind of area. But in the short term, you find out who's responsible for this attack and you take them out. Track them down, blow them up. You come after our boys, we're going to take you out. And then, a few months later, kind of make sure you're not overextended in areas maybe you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Hey, shout out to Mitchell Godfrey too. He says everyone should take the Hillsdale course. It's free, titled American Foreign Policy. I think I just got my roadmap for maternity leave. I'm totally going to spend the nights nursing and taking American foreign policy. I'm pumped. Thanks, Mitchell.
I think you're probably in the 1% on that one, Erica. I don't know if many
Oh.
people use maternity leave for that, but I'm proud that you do. It makes you special. So Josh had a piece he was excited to talk about here at Nighthawk. If you want to pull it up, it's the Axios piece. So it was a piece basically about how Trump's 2024 campaign will be different. And if anyone was watching previous episodes, Catholic Vote did indeed endorse Donald Trump in the Republican primary, which was met with many strong emotions. However, one thing that this article revealed, and then I actually had the pleasure of doing an interview with a former ambassador from the U.S. to Portugal. He worked on the Trump campaign. He's actually still working on the Trump campaign. And he gave me the same story. Something is very different about this campaign compared to the 2016 campaign. And Josh had some things that he'd like to talk about here.
Yeah, I mean, even the 2020 campaign, but the 2016 Trump campaign especially, completely, totally disorganized. Those guys, and they acted like they were magicians or whatever. And what happened was Trump he caught lightning in a bottle, and he spoke to the moment where voters were in 2016, and the MSNBC and CNN put him on TV round the clock because they thought no one's going to believe this stuff. This is going to be so damaging. Can you believe he's saying this? And so they just put him on all the time, and Americans were watching him and going, "Yeah, gosh, I don't know. I think he's got a point there." And so the lesson the media learned from that was, gosh, maybe we shouldn't give him millions of dollars of free advertising, free money, airtight that. But so what happened now is Donald Trump is running a completely and totally different campaign. I mean, absolute chaos in 2016 to this very buttoned up, well-managed, disciplined presidential campaign. Axios has got the details on it. We can share it in the show notes. The campaign managers that they have now, this operation is smooth. They know exactly what they're doing. They have a whole machine in place for all these different people running for Congress, running for Senate, running for legislature even. You want to get Trump's endorsement? Okay, you endorse Trump, and then he can endorse you and all this stuff. It's actually acting like a well-oiled presidential campaign, and it's shown quite the big a difference. The thing the media noticed was like in Iowa. So when they had the Iowa caucuses, they had these special gold-trimmed hats that showed, I'm a precinct captain or whatever. And they gave it out to the people who would represent Trump at each of these caucuses. And it was like, a status symbol. And they kept talking about how, Trump is the guy who used to, own all these hotels, and he understands the hospitality industry, and he understands about, rewarding people who are on his side. So this whole this whole article talks about how Susie Wiles and Chris Labasita just running a absolute tight ship, and it shows they're much stronger position. A year ago, people thought coming off of the 2022 midterms that it was going to be a two-man race, that it was going to be a very strong competitor from Ron DeSantis, but because of the decision that Trump made to hire these two people to run his campaign, he is in a much more powerful position politically than anyone thought possible a year ago.
Yeah. And that the ambassador, his name was George Glass. I was talking to him. And what was interesting about my conversations with him was, one, he kind of revealed a way to look at Trump that I hadn't thought about when he was talking about how he interacts with the media. And of course, everyone sees the highlight tape of, what's going on. But he said two things he said to him. One, I am a New York City street brawler. Like, if someone calls me a name, I'm calling them a name right back. Like, I will not hold back. I'm always going to throw punches. That's never going to change. Number two, I always respond in kind, which I was like, that actually kind of gave me pause. Like, if someone calls me a name, I will call them a name. If someone has a substantial argument or whatever, when he's sitting down with them in person, he'll actually respond to the argument. He matches the tone that's given to him. He's like, you watch. this will break people's brains. People are not used to being spoken to, especially media personalities are not used to being spoken to the way that they get to speak to other people because the microphone's one way. And I was like, that is obviously you see the success. It worked, but I was like, man. And then I started kind of looking at some of Trump's commentary like that. Like that is an interesting thing. But in terms of an international scale as well, he was talking about being an ambassador, and what every country wants is access to the president. And at first I asked him, like, so was the international community kind of scared when Trump got into office? You know, everyone was hearing the names and they were hearing how he was talking about in the media. What were they thinking? So yeah, honestly, people were nervous at first. And then as soon as stuff started getting done in Portugal, they were the biggest fans ever. And I was like, that is a really interesting way to think about
Get stuff done.
So apparently what he did was he appointed, instead of appointing politicians or bureaucrats to ambassadorships, he appointed business leaders. So he took this guy, George Glass, he was a former business owner, to Portugal. Another guy was a major, I think, Citibank executive. And he said he sent them out to negotiate. So he said one of his biggest things was getting people to add to NATO. And he's like, I need people to add their contributions to NATO. America's taking too much of that burden. And he said, all right, increase your contribution by X%. And he came up with the percent himself. He's like, you're going to increase by this much. All the business leaders went out and said, hey, I do this for a living. This is easy. I can negotiate like no problem. And sure enough, you know, NATO got through. So it was interesting.
Yeah, that was a huge thing. Those NATO partners only did like 1.5% of their budget would go to NATO, and now it's up to 3%. So because we ended up carrying a lot more of the burden because they just were like, whatever, the U.S. will pay for it.
Yeah. So a lot of things like that. And when I think about how this campaign will be different, there's a lot of people I think let him down. And I know people have strong thoughts about this as well, but probably the Sidney Powells and the Rudy Giuliani's that really just went off the rails there towards the end. And it seems like, I wonder if this is, to me, putting together seasoned campaign professionals like this, putting together a crack team is like the adults in the room and the real people that get things done are like, Trump is truly our only hope here. And we need to get behind the wagon, get on the team and we cannot have Biden be president again. And so now maybe that's the inspiration maybe to get it going, but I'm seeing much different from Trump.
Right after 2020, when the whole debacle of, you know, how close those votes were, Donald Trump was willing to listen to whoever told him what he wanted to hear. So Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, that kind of stuff. Now, with these campaign managers that I'm talking about, Susan Wiles and Leva Basida, what's going on here now is he actually wants people who understand how to win the game. And so these guys are masterminds on all the different rules in the different states for, you know, the allocation of delegates to the Republican National Convention. Because some, you know, the earlier states are proportional. So, you know, the number of, like, for example, in 2016, Trump and Cruz and Marco Rubio were all super close to each other in Iowa. And the number of delegates that was won was not that much different. It was like 7, 8, or 9. It sounds kind of obscure, but then as you get to other states, then you start to realize, no, you need to start racking up these wins because it'll turn out to be, instead of proportionate, winner take all. That's why you need campaign managers who are keeping their eye on the prize. How do you actually get out there and win? And because some states are like Nevada, their caucuses, and sometimes they have these obscure rules for how they allocate their delegates. These guys running Trump's campaign absolutely understand what it takes to actually put the points on the board, win those delegates, and they're doing great. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. All right, so now we move on. We have a little bit of church news here. What, Erica, I think you said your mom or someone had something to say about our coverage.
Oh man, I'm not going to call out my mom on this. No. Just people expressed concern to me that we were perhaps skirting with scandal, and all of it. We're towing the line, and I just want to say,
like my tweet. They didn't like my tweet.
They didn't like your tweet. Is the tweet going up, Pogo? Oh man,
no, I'm saving it.
It was a good one. It was good. Okay. We're gonna save. Got it. Yeah. So the point is, the scandal's coming. Unfortunately, at this point, from the Holy Father himself. He gave another off-the-cuff interview, which was just not helpful. Yeah, in which he suggested a two-state solution for the Middle East, which I'm just like, what is this? Is 1980? No. And then he goes into Fiducia again. Remember, do we all remember how in Fiducia Supplicans, Fiducia Fabulosa, it says there will be no further commentary on this document because this is the final word? I'm like, guys, just
I
shut up
remember that.
already. I remember that. That was back in December. Well, here we had
that
another
lasted
interview.
3 days, I think.
Yeah, we had another clarification. And in this one, he's talking about the church in Africa. Oh yeah, he says, regarding criticisms of the document, Francis noted that, quote, those who vehemently protest belong to a small ideological group. And I'm like, oh, you mean the entire Orthodox Church, all the Eastern Rite churches, most of the bishops from all the continents. And then he goes, but don't worry about that African church. You know, Africa is a special case because for them, note the moral relativism, homosexuality is something ugly. They don't tolerate it. So those special little dark Africans, got to forgive them
who
for
apparently
not...
believe in Catholicism.
Oh, I know. Wait, they're actually
who believe that sin
reading
is
church
ugly.
doctrine. Oh my
Crazy.
goodness.
Nighthawk,
was-
pull up my tweet on that.
Okay, thanks, Nighthawk. This is a good one. This is a good one.
It was a good summary of the both paragraphs, but not only...
Oh man.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait on the tweet, but
Again, just out of touch. Of touch.
Every time he
kind of
ever steps foot on an airplane and does an interview or just gives off the cuff remarks, it's always the worst possible. Like, why can't we just no talking on airplanes rule? I think for Pope Francis would be great.
Yeah.
And
I spent...
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, here it comes. I spent 10 years of this pontificate saying things like, well, he was on the airplane and maybe his advisors just didn't inform him of the full scope of blah, blah, blah. At this point, I'm kind of done with this.
You can't keep giving them. Yeah. So, Scott, zoom in here.
I'm like, come on.
Can we have a rule? Future popes will not say anything on airplanes and will not be Jesuit? Is that asking?
How about they just go back into the Vatican, like pre-Pope Paul VI, like
Eric, I have the
tiaras, and they don't talk.
So the quote is, of course, after saying we're not going to talk about it anymore, we have, quote, regarding criticisms of Fiducia Supplicans, the Pope noted that those who vehemently protest belong to small ideological groups, aka half the church, I guess.
Oh, wait, Tom, I got a question.
Yeah.
Those people who belong to the small ideological groups, are they, would the Pope declare them to be objectively disordered?
Well,
your theology is objectively disordered.
But describing the church in Africa as, quote, a special case, quote, for them homosexuality is something ugly from a cultural point of view.
You know what's different about Africa is that the bishops there believe it. That's what's different.
They believe in Jesus.
They don't believe it. They believe what's taught in the catechism. So I don't understand why the Pope is just singling out these Africans as too simple-minded to understand what the catechism itself takes. And I've seen so much talk online about, like, it's not hard to understand blessing individuals is so different than blessing couples. We've always been able to bless individuals. Why come out with an entire divisive document saying exactly the opposite and then claim, like, it's just such gaslighting at this point? I don't understand. It's bloviating, it's gaslighting. Like, we keep bringing it up because it keeps happening.
It's not just Africa, though. I mean, there are priests and bishops in the United States and even France. Remember France? They're like,
even France, all the French bishops, which was a happy surprise. Oh man,
the Jesuits are back.
Honestly, I think the small ideological group are the people in the church, like Father James Martin, who are pushing this LGBT trans agenda. That's the small ideological group, and they've got the microphone.
They've got the Pope's ear.
Yeah, and then do we all need to pre-Twilight Zone need to sit and watch the video of New York City taking down Thomas Jefferson together and just have a moment of silence?
It's gonna make me cry, but I guess so.
For those who haven't seen Nighthawk, we got to pull us up one. Got to pull us one up as well. So New York City,
iconoclasts.
Yeah. Oh man. Moment of silence on an audio podcast.
You know, this hurts, and I'm not going to be silent. This hurts, but President Trump warned us about this in the discussion of Charlottesville, and the media lied through their teeth. And President Biden continues to lie about that because he said, you know, if you take down the Confederate stuff, you take down the flag, you take down the Confederate soldiers and all that other stuff, you start with that. But then what's to stop you from taking down Washington or Jefferson? They own slaves, you know?
Correct.
And people are like, what are you talking about? We would never do that. Wait 10 more minutes and we'll do it then.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this was not the only iconoclastic moment. I just have to say, People's Republic of Massachusetts, Soviet Socialists of the North, they also decided this weekend to erase history. We had a town in Massachusetts say they're going to take down problematic historic signs. And this is in Concord. This is like the birthplace of the revolution. Do you guys know Paul Revere's Ride? You should know Paul Revere's Ride. Yeah. So Paul Revere's Ride, this is the home, the Lexington and Concord, the battle that starts the Revolutionary War. And they're taking down their historical markers. Now, those of you who don't live in New England, we love our historical markers. They are like every quarter mile, there's a historical marker about like somebody's mill on the pond and something happened. And so taking these down, they're just like, we don't want to remember this history. This is not worthy of it. And yeah, so the iconoclasm continues up here in the Puritan North. Flee for your lives, everyone. My life.
That's the real. Back to what Josh said, though, if I could, this all to me stems from Robert E. Lee, like the conversation around Robert E. Lee. Back when you could make good faith arguments about, for or against, that's one thing. But as soon as we got into let's tear it all down and move on, it doesn't surprise me we're getting back to the origins of America on the East Coast. But by all accounts, Robert E. Lee, Mexican-American war hero, West Point graduate, friend of many in armies, generally considered the most gentlemanly and successful general at that time, of course, fighting for the South. But he actually had many, you can debate about his progressive at the time views of the dignity of Black people, much more than a lot of Union people at the time. And he was actually given a place of honor by the soldiers of the North after he after he surrendered, because he didn't want to draw a bloody conflict. So I think it was dumb that every
President Lincoln, was he stupid? Was he wrong to say with malice toward none? He wanted to end the war and do it with dignity and to consider them back in fold. We are one nation now. We are all brothers and sisters together here. And that's the problem with this kind of stuff. How do you take down these statues if you honestly love your country? If you do love your country, why would you do that?
Right.
And so, like, that's why I've always said with January 6th, it was the Democrats love that, because that's the day they get to say, we're the patriotic ones who love the Constitution and the rule of law in America, and you're the ones who hate, the Constitution, and you hate the country of America, and we're the ones who are patriot. And then every other day of the year, they're the ones taking down these statues. Like, well, what's going on here?
Such a good point, because it makes me think about the rhetoric, especially coming out of the Biden administration, of like half the country being a Nazi. How different that is from Abraham Lincoln, malice towards none. It's like we've labeled half our country brothers and sisters. We've even gotten criticisms
New
for
York
calling
City.
people.
New York City is going to take down the Thomas Jefferson statue. If they were given a choice, would they blow up Mount Rushmore?
Absolutely.
It's probably not far off, I'd imagine.
The only thing saving Mount Rushmore is it's in the Dakotas. That's about it.
Yeah. Anne Marie Sullivan. George Orwell was a few years before his time, and I couldn't agree more.
Shout out Anne Marie.
All right, we got Twilight Zone now. Erica, you're up first.
Oh, hey. All right. Well, I was going to go dark, but I'm actually going to go with Barbie. Barbie the movie. Snubbed.
You a big Barbie fan? Did you like it?
No, I'm not a big Barbie fan. Michael Knowles, you're wrong. Just want to say that. I'm more on the Ben Shapiro side of things. But yeah, so Ryan Gosling, who played Ken, of course, in the movie, he got an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Meanwhile, director Greta Gerwig and star Margot Robbie were not nominated for Oscars. But don't worry, Hillary Clinton had words of comfort for Greta and Margot. She writes, "While it can sting to win the box office but not take home the gold," okay, it's still 2016 for Hillary. She has not moved on. He has a little more therapy, a little more leather couch. Your millions of fans love you. You were both so much more than Kenough. Okay, I just have to go off for a minute on my beef. Michael Knowles is trying to convince me that this is like a conservative movie because in the end, Barbie goes in like the final scene, spoiler alert, she visits her gynecologist. So somehow this is a sign that she's now pro-natalist Barbie or something like that. But the problem is what is getting picked up on by all the people actually watching the movie is not Barbie going to the gynecologist because now she wants to be a mom, but the monologue. This is what the New York Times had their big op-ed about how awesome this was. The monologue by Gloria, who in the middle of the movie goes on this riff about how horrible it is to be a woman and how the system is rigged against us. And she says,
Honestly,
the
facts.
system is rigged. Yeah, you have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail. And she goes on and on. It's like 3 minutes.
You don't
of
feel
this.
like that?
I don't feel like this. Look,
Or-
like maybe I'm privileged in my womanhood here because I'm
Maybe-
surrounded by guys like you, but
Yeah, this is true. By Ken's.
Okay.
Through Ken's.
right. And I just
Don't
have to
call me
point
a
out
Ken,
too.
bro.
Yeah, no. In the movie, there's ugly Barbie, and so never
Dang.
mind. There's no ugly Ken though.
No, let's not go
Okay.
too deep into that.
Fill
All
that
right.
in.
But,
We're not
Erica,
gonna go
don't you
there.
think though? I think people kind of took the bait a little bit on
No,
Barbie
get that
being
off
like
the
a
screen.
conservative
Oh,
liberal.
look at that headline. Sorry, I'm sorry, Pogo.
The
Set me
conservative
off.
liberal
Triggered.
argument was kind of dumb. I thought, like, can't we this is just a movie made about dolls, and maybe this is just how my brain works, but all the Ken memes were phenomenal. I mean, Ken being
Okay,
a Chad,
Ryan
Ken
Gosling is
dancing, like, yes,
really
he deserves
good.
an Oscar
Yeah,
because it was
he
hilarious,
does.
and he's a
Yes,
Chad.
he's memeable. He's totally memeable.
So that was
But
my
I
take on
think
the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's just a harmless thing. I mean, people said this about all the sitcoms in the 90s, like Friends, Sex and the City. Oh, it's just all harmless. It's all harmless. The problem is that these moms are bringing their 8 to 12-year-old girls to watch this movie because mom has this like nostalgia she has to feed, and she's gonna stuff it into her daughter. And they bring their little girls to this. They hear these words over and over again about how everything is rigged against women. And what is that? Okay, if you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy with someone who's depressed, which most American teenage girls who are white and liberal are, see the stats, I will put that in the show notes. Telling them that everything's against them, they are victims, is the exact opposite of what they should be hearing. So this is just, I think that Barbie is just perpetuating these, for lack of a better word, disempowering thought patterns. And it's frustrating. I think it's a stinky movie. Michael Knowles is wrong. Period. That's my
I
hot
mean,
take.
that's kind of obvious. It's kind of, why would anyone want to go see this movie? I never see movies anyway.
Nostalgia.
Mercer's
it's all
take
this like
Who's got
Barbie
time or
violent
money
ones.
for that?
millennial misery. Loves company.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
Ken memes.
All I remember thinking about the movie is,
Ken
oh,
memes.
Margot Robbie is going to be Barbie. Not a shock.
No.
No, I think cast
Stunning
pretty
and
well.
brave.
Stunning and brave. All right, my Twilight Zone. So this is where Mercer's tweet gets featured. So I should I start with the tweet? I don't know. This is pretty good. Nighthawk, can you pull up the tweet? Yeah. So it was past weekend. 2 very different things happened inside the U.S. Capitol in recent weeks. A congressional staffer had sex in a Senate hearing room, and the first traditional Latin Mass was celebrated. Guess which one the Jesuits spoke out against? Josh.
That was
that was inspired.
Chef's kiss.
That was inspired.
Oh,
Josh is now
man.
an influencer. Congratulations. So Nighthawk, if you can pull up the America Mag article about the illicit Latin Mass held in the U.S. Capitol. So
yeah, illicit. The headline itself was ridiculous. I mean,
we were privy to some knowledge on that there would be a Latin Mass celebrated in the U.S. Capitol. The first Latin Mass celebrated in the U.S. Capitol, and it was on the same day that the FBI's alleged anti-Catholic, even the header, alleged anti-Catholic bias.
Right. So they did this, Thomas, getting it on the 1-year anniversary of the release of the Richmond memo. That memo that explained how the FBI were looking into these crazy Catholics who go to traditional masses. So we thought, hey, traditional, not my idea, but some of these Catholics like, why don't we have a traditional Latin Mass inside the U.S. Capitol? And I thought that was pretty cool. And of course, America, which is the Jesuit magazine, freaked out about it. And so they had the headline, illicit Mass.
We get a shout out in the end of the article.
We totally do. And they spell our name wrong.
Right there on the screen, if you zoom in, you can see the reporter's name there, Michael L. Lachlan. He's He's a gay journalist with America Magazine. He used to write for The Advocate, which is a gay magazine. It's not like a gay Catholic thing, or it's like literally it's been around for 30, 40 years. This guy, super left wing, super into the LGBT agenda. And so he decides to write his article complaining that there was an illicit Latin mass. And he makes sure that his readers know, according to Cardinal Gregory, there's only 3 places you should legally be allowed to do the Latin mass in the entire city of Washington.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. TC wasn't having that. So yeah, it was interesting. It was kind of funny. You get both ends of the criticism. Some were the people that are like the Jesuits. And then there was a lot of mega trads that were mad that it was celebrated there because they were like, it didn't have the right cloth. It didn't have the right this and that.
Right.
So it just seems
on
like
a folding table. You're like, guys.
Yeah, it angered everyone. Like everyone was mad about it.
Perfect.
No, you're doing something right.
Everyone missed the message. Yeah, I'll talk about like right over the target. So yeah, I thought that was worthy of Twilight Zone mention.
Can I just say one other thing about the journalism quality in that America? In order to debunk the idea that the Richmond memo even meant anything, the only people they quoted were actually the FBI itself in its own explanation.
Genius.
I'm like, well, guys,
you can trust them.
Yeah, this is definitely legit.
Trust us, we didn't do anything wrong.
FBI licit, mass illicit.
Yeah,
maybe this reporter could write about Watergate. Maybe the reporter could write about Watergate and then just interview sources in the Nixon White House. Oh, we did nothing wrong.
Yeah, and to round out the Twilight Zone, yes, the Lions did lose yesterday. Yes, it crushed my heart and soul, but we will be back, and everyone loves, criticizing from outside the arena. It was fun watching my NFC opponents, throw stones, but guess what? You weren't in the arena, and we were, and we'll be back, and we're gonna have record dominance the next couple of years. So we'll be back.
Anyway. That's your Twilight Zone?
Yep.
That's literally your Twilight Zone.
Yep. I rounded it out. That was a personal section.
Okay. I see. That's good.
Josh.
Part of your healing process.
A Nighthawk. Come on. Brock Purdy on the screen right now.
Brock Purdy.
That's what happens when the guy behind the screen is from California. He throws this up.
Yeah, this is rigged.
Nighthawk.
I mean, I don't know. Hopefully Nighthawk doesn't have access to the picture I sent at halftime when we were up 24-7. It was just a big smile on my face, and it just aged horribly. But that's life, in the words of Frank Sinatra. That's life.
No, actually, trust me, I'm a Vikings fan, so I know about the pain and the hurt, because at one time I was watching the game, the Lions game, the championship game, and Fox was celebrating this is 30 years of having the NFC championship game, and they had 4 photos on the screen, and 2 of them were Vikings games in which they lost.
Yeah.
Brett Favre when he was a Viking for like 10 minutes and he lost, and then the kick against the Falcons. It's still sore. Guy was perfect all season, and then he biffs an easy
field we know pain on
would have sent us to the Super Bowl, but I'm not mad. I didn't throw things in my dorm room. Anyway, my Twilight Zone. Cecile Richards, former CEO of Planned Parenthood, she actually has brain cancer, and we pray for her. We want her to be cured, even though she's actually spending every day trying to advocate for more killing of babies. That as Christians, we want all people to be healed. We want people to see the light and love of Jesus Christ. We would love for her to repent someday. But she, despite having brain cancer, is not giving up. She is fighting every day for more and more abortion, and she's using all the same baloney talking points that everyone else on the left is using. But I did want to point out this. So brain cancer is not stopping her death march. Her advocacy for the bloodlust of abortion. But she made this comment speaking about the way the political debate and abortion is going on right now. She said, and look at the Republicans. They are running and hiding on this issue. I don't think that's just her wishful thinking. I think she's got a point there. I think there are a lot of Republican office holders across the country who are kind of terrified by this issue. They know that a lot of single women are voting. They're Taylor Swift fans, and they're voting for Democrats because of the abortion issue. And they don't maybe vote as often as they usually do, but now because Roe being overturned, they're more energized. And so that has a lot of Republican lawmakers terrified. But the fact is, that just means we got to get out there, all of us, and work harder and explain what's going on this issue and say why abortion isn't the answer. But at the end of the day, Christ told us to pray. And we do. We pray for people. But Cecile, at the end of the day, isn't our enemy. The enemy is Satan. And unfortunately, she's supporting a very wicked agenda. And I hope she repents. But I certainly don't wish, ill of her or anyone.
Yeah, it just seems like the real Twilight Zone is that this woman who literally is dying from brain cancer has the strength to continue to beat the abortion drum when we have men with full facilities in office that we elected there don't have the spine to be pro-life.
That's right.
Did I put a nail on the head there?
Or shy. Yeah, that's it.
Nailed it.
Shy from the issue. Totally true.
Yeah. Anyway, before anyone gets in any more Lions digs, I'm going to end it. If you would like to support the program, subscribe, like this, reviews, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you want to talk to me, loopcast@catholicvote.org, email in. I got a lot of emails about the Trump email. I'm still working through the Trump ones. Those will be fun to go through. But until then, we're praying for you guys. Ask that you pray for us. St. Fidelis, St. Thomas More, Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us. And we will see you guys on the next one. Peace.